4:12 a.m., Minneapolis looked frozen in time, an early morning canvas of snow-dusted rooftops, dark windows, and streets so silent it felt as though the entire city was holding its breath. But beneath that stillness inside a federal command center, lit by the cold glow of monitor screens, a storm had already taken shape. Analysts and agents moved in tight, deliberate motion, studying a digital map streaked with red indicators, each representing a threat spiraling across the Midwest. The alarms had temporarily stopped, but no one in the room mistook the quiet for safety. The danger was still pulsing. Meanwhile, police departments across multiple states were reporting an unsettling rise in street-level violence. In one small city, officers responded to 87 violent incidents in just 9 months, all linked to individuals appearing repeatedly in welfare databases and embassy-adjacent records. Knife attacks at bus stops, fights outside grocery stores, armed disputes in parking lots. Every confrontation felt less like chaos and more like choreography. Fraud trails were even more disturbing. A woman using a falsified identity had managed to collect $48,000 in benefits while simultaneously working inside an illegal nightclub connected to trafficking operations. Other fraudulent accounts funneled housing, disability, and childcare funds overseas, each transaction split into smaller payments to avoid federal detection. The signs all pointed toward a system, not a scattered group structured to extract and export American financial resources. And it wasn't until investigators uncovered a hidden cabinet inside an embassy-linked office that the truth became impossible to ignore. Dozens of fake passports, IDs, and travel documents were neatly organized, each linked to arrests for robbery, assault, or trafficking. These weren't isolated forgeries, they were components of a production line. Mood in the command center shifted from confusion to clarity. Federal analysts realized they weren't witnessing a crisis, but an infiltration, one finance protected and expanding faster than traditional law enforcement could track. The final threads continued pointing in a single direction: Ambassador Rami Farah. Someone with diplomatic immunity, unsearched shipments, and access to federal systems had the means to orchestrate everything: fraud, drugs, violence, financial transfers, and disguise it as routine diplomatic activity. By the time the agents gathered all the evidence on the wall, the web had formed public benefits siphoned into shell networks funneled overseas and ultimately directed into the hands of Al-Shabaab. Drugs produced in China routed through Mexico and moved into American neighborhoods by Somali criminal groups. Violence blooming across cities like an infection, and above it all, a diplomat with full security clearance. The network wasn't hiding, it was operating in plain sight. The moment the agents understood that they knew the window for action was closing fast. The turning point came at 4:05 a.m. when a single encrypted message flashed across every federal radio channel: all units execute. Secure every target, no warnings. It was the moment the investigation transformed into an operation. For weeks, agents had watched the network grow bolder, more synchronized, more dangerous. Now the window for observation had closed. Action was the only option left. Armored vehicles rolled out from staging zones near the highway engines, rumbling low to avoid alerting anyone nearby. Their headlights were dimmed, and not a single siren pierced the night air. Overhead, helicopter blades beat in slow, rhythmic pulses, their spotlights off, waiting. More than 900 federal badges from the FBI, ICE, Homeland Security, state police, and county deputies were converging on a shared objective: break the network before dawn. First target was a modest home on a silent residential street. To neighbors, nothing about it ever seemed unusual, but to the agents monitoring thermal signatures, the interior buzzed with activity no ordinary house should generate. As a strike team approached, a man burst through the back door carrying a rifle. A flashbang detonated against the pavement, erupting into a blinding fireball that swallowed the alleyway. The suspect collapsed stunned as agents swept through the doorway. Inside, they found envelopes of cash phones wrapped in aluminum foil to block tracking, and a table buried beneath forged documents, evidence of a financial apparatus designed to stay invisible. For months, federal intelligence teams had been tracking patterns no one could fully decipher. Reports were arriving in waves from emergency rooms, police station, social workers, each pointing to a surge connected to a Somali criminal network that seemed to appear everywhere and nowhere at once. The numbers alone painted a staggering portrait of collapsed drug-related arrests climbing 312%, violent assaults exploding 280%, and cases tied to prostitution and human trafficking spiking 190%. Each statistic wasn't just data, it was a red siren. Across the city, another team hit a warehouse. The outer shell looked like a typical import business, but the agents knew better. Hydraulic tools chewed through the reinforced entrance, exposing a hidden room sealed behind a false wall. Inside lay more than 580 pounds of narcotics, meth, heroin, fentanyl pills stacked in plastic bags. The estimated street value $22 million. It was one of the largest internal seizures tied to the network so far. Meanwhile, a major highway exit devolved into chaos. A delivery truck attempted to ram through a roadblock, its tires screaming across asphalt. Federal vehicles boxed it in. Gunfire shattered the engine block. When agents pried open the back doors, they uncovered duffel bags overflowing with weapons, many stripped of serial numbers, a mobile armory disguised as a commercial transport run. The most violent encounter erupted behind an industrial yard, where two armed men had taken positions on a rooftop. As federal teams advanced, muzzle flashes sliced through the darkness. Sparks erupted off metal rails as bullets ricocheted across the ground. A helicopter's spotlight roared to life, cutting through the shadows like a blade. After a tense standoff, the shooters surrendered their vantage point, lost to the tightening federal perimeter. Raids were unfolding simultaneously, each designed to neutralize a different nerve of the network. But one location loomed above the rest, a building that, according to analysts, held the operational core. Embassy linked office. Agents knew breaching it would ignite the most politically volatile moment of the entire operation. Yet, as the night stretched toward dawn, they also knew something else. They had no choice. By the time teams converged on the embassy-linked building, dawn was still an hour away. To passersby, the structure looked harmless, an unremarkable two-story brick office in a government district, a flag out front, a polished brass plate bearing the Somali diplomatic seal. Cars drifted past without suspicion, but federal analysts already knew the truth. This wasn't a place for diplomacy. It was a central artery of the network. 10:19 a.m. After authorization cleared through the command post, breach teams moved. Two agents approached the rear service door, affixed a compact explosive charge, and braced. A sharp concussive boom split through the hallway as the door blasted inward. Almost instantly, shields, rifles, and tactical boots filled the corridor. Inside, chaos bloomed. A man in a suit bolted from behind a desk, clutching a laptop. He sprinted toward the stairwell, but agents intercepted him halfway up, dragging him down as the laptop, still warm, slipped from his grip. Downstairs, another pair of men attempted to destroy evidence. Black smoke curled from a metal trash can where papers and plastic folders were beginning to melt. Agents subdued both men and smothered the flames before the documents were lost. Senior DEA official repeated a warning he had issued for years. Someone in America dies from a drug overdose every 5 minutes. That's 294 people every single day, a toll equal to a 737 jetliner crashing daily, a comparison that had haunted the room. The agents around him understood the implications intimately. They had already pulled 310 million in fentanyl, meth, and weapons off the streets and executed 4,700 arrests. But the violence and overdoses hadn't slowed. If anything, they were accelerating. First glance, the office appeared deceptively ordinary: printers, humming binders, stacked neatly, filing cabinets aligned like any administrative workspace. But nothing inside reflected diplomatic function. No cultural programs, no policy memos, no international correspondence. Instead, the desks held binders of identity documents, spreadsheets charting benefit withdrawals, and envelopes of cash categorized by week and month. Behind a false wall, agents discovered something far more alarming: a narrow server room housing 7 computer servers, each connected to a satellite router flashing with active transmissions. Technicians rushed in, disconnecting hardware and sealing drives for forensic review. Later, investigators would confirm that many transmissions had traveled through Somalia, Turkey, and the Gulf states, ultimately landing in private accounts tied to the same criminal network. The cabinet revealed rows of blue folders meticulously labeled like a library catalog. Inside were lists of names, thousands of them paired with phone numbers, addresses, and benefit accounts. Some marked arrived, others processing, and a chilling few stamped sent. It was the logistical blueprint of the entire operation. The most disturbing discovery lay beneath a paperweight on one of the desks. A thick ledger, its pages crammed with totals, percentages, and transfer breakdowns. At the bottom of the latest entry, written in stark block letters, were the words 10% for security Al-Shabaab. The room fell silent. Federal agents understood immediately this wasn't simple fraud. It was a financial engine feeding a terrorist organization built under the shelter of diplomatic legitimacy. Outside, morning traffic continued moving as though nothing had changed. But inside the building, every scrap of paper, every server, every forged passport told the same story. America hadn't been dealing with a criminal ring. Had been staring at a foreign-backed operation hiding in plain sight. Once the embassy-linked office was secured, federal analysts finally had something they'd been chasing for months, but could never fully assemble a map. Not a simple chart of locations, but the skeleton of an entire criminal organism, its arteries, its disguised storefronts, its financial flows, its safe houses, and its overseas connections. The evidence pulled from the building server's ledgers, phone logs, blue folders became coordinates in a vast, previously invisible network. First revelation was a cluster of businesses across multiple states operating under identical corporate names. On paper, they were logistics firms, import services, and community organizations. In reality, many were empty shells. Their windows were coated with dust, their interiors barren, yet their bank accounts had moved millions annually. One site in a quiet industrial park appeared deserted, but agents found 6 steel safes drilled into the concrete. Inside, $1.8 million in cash, neatly wrapped, each bundle tagged by week. Records confirmed the money originated from welfare programs, childcare subsidies, disability benefits, housing assistance, food support, all siphoned with robotic precision. Yet the drugs were only the visible wound. The deeper bleeding came from the financial arteries being drained dry. Investigators confirmed over $1 billion in welfare fraud, while whistleblowers warned the real figure over the past decade could be closer to $8 billion. People were entering the country with forged documents, tapping into public benefit systems, and funneling the proceeds overseas. The final destination was not speculation. Intelligence linked the funds directly to Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda-aligned terrorist organization operating in Somalia. Another location posed as a warehouse for used furniture. Workers unloaded chairs, sofas, and mattresses from battered vans. But concealed inside chair frames were fentanyl powder packets. Inside sofa cushions were metal tubes stuffed with ammunition. The operation blended seamlessly into the neighborhood's daily rhythm, masking contraband inside the mundane. Even more disturbing were 2 factories registered as nutritional supplement processors. From the outside, they looked like small manufacturing plants. Inside, the machinery betrayed the truth: industrial pill presses capable of producing 100,000 tablets every 10 hours. Lab tests revealed the tablets were laced with fentanyl and meth. Boxes were labeled with counterfeit medical barcodes, giving them the illusion of legitimacy. Digital forensics would reveal the darkest layer. Encrypted files recovered from the embassy office documented financial transfers routed through Somalia, Turkey, Kenya, and the UAE. Each transfer was divided into dozens of microtransactions to evade detection. A consistent pattern emerged: public benefits, shell companies, foreign accounts, a 10% cut routed to Al-Shabaab. Assessed totals were staggering. From just 5 years of documented transfers, analysts traced more than $280 million leaving the United States. Projections indicated the true number could be significantly higher if older undocumented years were accounted for. Network's violence footprint was equally chilling. A cross-check of recovered names with federal crime databases revealed links to 14 armed robberies, 9 shootings, 5 kidnappings, and 3 murder investigations. None were random acts. Each fit within a system of intimidation and revenue extraction. Every stolen dollar funded the next operation. Every trafficked pill kept the financial engine alive. By the time analysts pinned the final documents to the command center wall, the image was unmistakable. A transnational enterprise using diplomacy as camouflage, welfare programs as revenue streams, American laws as tools, and violence as enforcement. Web no longer looked chaotic, it looked deliberate. Every line of connection pointed back to a single architect, Ambassador Rami Farah. By early afternoon, as analysts pieced together evidence seized from homes, warehouses, shell companies, and the embassy-linked office, it became clear that what they uncovered was not just criminal activity, it was a national security breach of historic scale. Documents, financial ledgers, and digital logs pointed to something far more sprawling than anyone had anticipated. What authorities initially believed was a regional crime surge turned out to be a multi-state, multi-layered infiltration stretching from small suburbs to major cities. Inside the command center, a long wall became the pulse of the investigation. Photos, transaction records, maps, and seized IDs formed a mosaic of a foreign-backed network operating in America's blind spots. Lines of red string linked phone numbers, addresses, and shell businesses across state lines. What once seemed like disconnected incidents, fraud cases, overdoses, missing funds, violent attacks now merged into a single chilling picture. The agents in the war room had studied similar networks before, but this one was different. This one carried an unmistakable signature, the precision of someone who understood law diplomacy and loopholes better than the people tasked with upholding them. Every lead, every financial trail, every forged document pointed back to one man, Rami Farah, 48, the Somali ambassador to the United States. Financial analysts took the first deep dive. From documents gathered over just 6 recent months, they confirmed $61 million in fraudulent benefit payments, $22 million funneled through shell companies, $14 million hidden in charity accounts, and $9 million transferred through encrypted apps. Yet these were only the surface transactions, the most recent, the most traceable. Many earlier years had no records at all suggesting intentional data destruction. When intelligence officials projected backward using existing patterns, they calculated that the US taxpayer loss exceeded $8 billion over a decade. The human cost eclipsed even the financial devastation. Hospitals reported unprecedented spikes in overdoses linked to fentanyl pills from pill presses discovered earlier. Suburbs previously untouched by organized crime now saw violence spilling into parking lots and storefronts. In one neighborhood, emergency services were dispatched 15 times in 30 days for drug deals, forced prostitution, and violent altercations. Senior citizens, often the most vulnerable targets of scams and narcotics dealers, lived in fear. Then came the revelation that shook even seasoned agents. Several names in the seized embassy files matched suspects connected to 14 robberies, 9 shootings, 5 kidnappings, and 3 murder investigations. Even more disturbing was the attack 2 months before, where a patrol officer pulling into a gas station was ambushed. His windshield exploded under gunfire. Though he survived, the injuries were permanent. With new evidence, investigators now believe that attack traced back to the same network and potentially to individuals protected by diplomatic channels. As the full scope came into view, the situation surpassed anything traditional law enforcement could manage. A secure emergency briefing was convened in the White House Situation Room. Cabinet members, intelligence chiefs, and senior advisors absorbed the findings. The message was unmistakable. This is not immigration fraud. This is national security infiltration. Officials outlined how the network exploited American generosity, public benefits, charity funds, social support systems to build a financial engine feeding Al-Shabaab, a terrorist organization responsible for massacres abroad. Every stolen dollar strengthened a foreign militant group. Every shipment of fentanyl pushed American communities closer to collapse. When the meeting ended, the decision was immediate and unanimous. Expand operations, increase arrests, freeze assets, remove foreign actors involved, trace every connected network across every state. For Americans watching the news that evening, the headlines seemed distant, abstract, but the truth was far more intimate. The threat wasn't across the ocean. Had been living among them the entire time. By the time dawn crept back over Minneapolis, the snow-covered streets looked untouched, quiet, orderly, almost serene. Cars eased onto the roads, children trudged towards school, and office lights flickered on as though nothing catastrophic had unfolded hours earlier. Yet inside the Federal Command Center, no one mistook the calm for resolution. What the agents now held was not merely evidence of crime, but a blueprint of how deeply a foreign-backed network had embedded itself into American life. The intelligence was accurate, then America's trust had been weaponized against itself. A diplomat, someone granted immunity, credibility, and access, had allegedly been operating as the architect of the largest internal security breach ever uncovered on US soil. And across a massive wall were the artifacts of that hidden war benefit statements, bank transfers, shell corporation filings, shipping manifests, forged IDs, names, faces, maps. Every arrow traced a route from American taxpayers through fabricated identities into shell companies and finally across oceans to accounts linked to Al-Shabaab. It was a financial bloodstream pulsing quietly for years, draining billions from a country that never realized it was bleeding. America's generosity, its welfare programs, social safety nets, medical assistance, housing support had been weaponized with ruthless efficiency. The elderly, the disabled, struggling families, the programs built to protect them had instead been hijacked to fund terror abroad and criminal expansion at home. Each stolen dollar wasn't just a statistic, it was an attack. Agents reviewed the timeline of the network's expansion. One conclusion became impossible to ignore. This operation didn't grow by hiding. It grew because no one believed something this vast could exist in plain sight. That disbelief had been the network's camouflage. Human consequences of that oversight stretched across communities. In towns once known for safety and stability, families began locking their doors earlier, shopkeepers closed before dusk, neighborhoods avoided certain streets. The violence linked to the network robberies, shootings, kidnappings, murders had eroded the quiet confidence of American life. The story of the gas station ambush resurfaced in the minds of many agents. A patrol officer doing nothing more than pulling in for routine surveillance had been met with gunfire. The windshield shattered. The officer survived but would carry the injuries forever. Now, with evidence connecting that attack to individuals embedded in the network, the gravity of the infiltration sharpened. Inside the Situation Room, the federal response had already begun shifting gears. More resources, more arrests, freezing financial channels, removing foreign individuals tied to the operation, expanding investigations into every state showing similar patterns. But the agents knew that policy changes alone couldn't mend the wound. Something far more unsettling lingered beneath the surface, the realization that danger can resemble normalcy. It could wear a suit, it could hold diplomatic credentials, it could speak the language of community support, it could attend local meetings, shake hands, and walk into government buildings without raising suspicion. Behind the smiles and paperwork it stole from the nation, destabilized neighborhoods, and fed violence abroad. Federal teams continued analyzing files late into the morning. A final truth settled over the room, one that none of them had wanted to face. The war they had uncovered wasn't over. It had only just revealed its first chapter. As daylight spread across Minneapolis, the command center hummed with a fatigued but focused energy. Agents sifted through the last folders retrieved from raids, each document adding weight to the story no one wanted to believe at first. America hadn't suffered a crime wave. It had suffered an infiltration, a methodical, well-planned, foreign-backed system that exploited the very structures designed to help the vulnerable. Outside, the city remained motionless. Inside, the weight of the coming hours pressed on every agent in the room. They knew the network had grown too bold, too entrenched, too dangerous, and whatever was about to unfold would test the limits of every agency involved. The evidence trail told the same story from every angle. Overdose data, fraud reports, confiscated drugs, weapons caches, diplomatic records, surveillance logs, and perhaps most hauntingly, the lists of names tied to violent crimes across multiple states. Violence had not merely accompanied the network, it had been embedded into its design. Every dollar stolen, every fraudulent benefit collected, every counterfeit passport printed served a purpose to expand reach, secure influence, and funnel resources back to Al-Shabaab, one of the world's most notorious militant groups. At the center of the room, a map traced the network's geography. What had once been isolated dots were now connected in unmistakable patterns from Minnesota to other regions, from urban neighborhoods to quiet suburbs. The network's tendrils touched public benefits offices, shell companies, storage warehouses, and community spaces that no one thought twice about. That illusion of normalcy had been its strongest shield. Now the shield was broken. The scale of the response required was unlike any domestic operation in recent memory, with authorization from the highest levels of government. Federal teams prepared for a nationwide expansion of raids, audits, asset seizures, and targeted arrests. Individuals connected to the criminal web, whether through fraud, trafficking, or direct support, were identified for removal or prosecution. And yet, even as these actions accelerated, the agents understood they were not simply dismantling a criminal network. Were patching a breach in the nation's defenses. America's compassion had been turned against it. Programs that fed hungry children, assisted veterans, supported the disabled, and uplifted struggling families had been exploited as revenue streams for terror. Every forged ID, every falsified application, every international transfer had chipped away at public trust. And trust once lost is the hardest currency to recover. As the final boards of evidence were reviewed, the room fell into a reflective silence. The operation had exposed something deeper than fraud or trafficking. It revealed how easily systems built for good could be corrupted when no one believes they are vulnerable. It revealed how danger can disguise itself behind legitimacy, and it revealed how quickly national security can be compromised when vigilance fades. Agents understood this truth intimately. Now evil rarely announces itself. It blends in, it attends community meetings, it shakes hands with officials, it files paperwork, and sometimes it carries a diplomatic passport. When the snow finally melted from the Minneapolis streets and life resumed its familiar rhythm, the memory of the raids lingered beneath the surface. For many, it became a reminder that the front lines of national security aren't always on distant shores. Sometimes they run through neighborhoods, grocery stores, community community centers and office buildings. Sometimes the battle is fought not with armies, but with spreadsheets, fraudulent claims, encrypted transfers, and counterfeit identities. America remains one of the most generous nations on earth. Its social programs are a lifeline to millions. But generosity without vigilance creates openings, and openings invite exploitation. The network was exposed, the money trail was severed, the infrastructure collapsed. But the responsibility of protecting what remains lies with everyone, officials, citizens, and institutions alike. Sunlight is the strongest disinfectant. Awareness is the strongest shield. Stillness of 4th at 12 a.m. was a lie. The storm had already begun. Even as dawn crept toward Minneapolis, the Federal Command Center felt suspended between urgency and disbelief. The agents reviewing months of surveillance footage understood one thing. Clearly, the surge in crime wasn't random, and it wasn't local. It was engineered. The deeper they dug, the more the patterns converged into something calculated, an infiltration moving beneath the surface of American life with quiet, relentless precision. Share the truth, stay informed, remain vigilant. Because this story, this warning is not the end. It is the beginning of the next chapter in protecting a nation that never imagined danger could walk through its front door carrying paperwork stamped diplomats. Began with the 140 covert night deliveries tracked over a 6-month period. Trucks rolled in under cover of darkness, slipping down alleys at 2 a.m., never triggering customs records, never appearing in official diplomatic logs. Each delivery had been routed to locations tied to Somali officials and community networks, yet none reflected the stated purpose of cultural or diplomatic activity. Instead, agents found shredded immigration forms, smashed SIM cards, wiring envelopes from money transfer shops, fragments of a puzzle no one yet